Hey everyone, this is Coach Mark Nolan. Welcome back to the episode of Don't Kick Your Coverage and the Parents Scholarship Podcast. We're the only 100% truly podcast dedicated solely to those high school students and their parents who are chasing that elusive D1 or next level scholarship offer, whether it's football, basketball, baseball, soccer, track and field, whatever it is. And our focus today is like we do in the past, have another yet awesome coach on to help us out and have him share his thoughts on how he deals with some of the issues that really is a global issue for all of us as coaches, all of us as parents, and all of us as players. So I'd like to introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Middleton, who's across the pond. He's probably an EPL guy and likes to hang out and
No.
have
Scottish Premier League, Mark. I'm
Scotch
all about
Premier
I'm
League.
all about I'm all about Scotland.
Okay. Okay. So with that said, and Kevin is actually an assistant manager of a club as well. So Kevin, thanks for joining us today and welcome aboard. Can you just give the parents and the athletes here just a second and give us your background and your overview and then we'll take it from there.
That's probably the hardest question you're going to ask me today, Mark. So I've been involved in football for a long, long time. Started off about 15 years ago. My son's coach quit, and I was just kind of handed the whistle. And if I didn't do it, the team would fold. So I stepped into the breach and saved the team. But you know what? I was just an amateur back then. Probably made it a lot worse before I made it a lot better. So a few lessons learned along that way. But then I moved into my own technical school. So I provided extra training for kids locally. Then I became the director of coaching, the equivalent of the director of coaching at a big football club, a big grassroots football club in the local area. I then moved into community foundations, which is like I don't know if you have an equivalent in the States, but it's a charitable arm of a professional football club designed to increase
Mhm.
participation of kids and players in the local area. So it's like a pre-academy thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I moved into the professional game, then I moved into the women's game, and then the professional women's game. And I'll just correct you on your point earlier on, Mark. I've recently just stepped away from my role because my online stuff, which is a whole other different story, has become all consuming. It takes up all of my time. So that's a very brief introduction. Hopefully, that gives you a flavor of where I've come from and where I'm at just now.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you very much, and thanks for the update on your new role. Congratulations on that. Yeah, I'm telling you, they going from the B2B sales that I was in when I was a CEO of a company to moving to online, it's a whole different animal. It's like moving from playing soccer, what we call football over in the UK, to being American football. I mean, we have a proloid spheroid football we use in America, and we have a rugby style, like came from the old rugby style, and then we have the round ball, the soccer ball. Two different, they both have 11 men on it, or women on it, or players on it, but two different focuses. So I love the fact that you, like the rest of us, you started in coaching, not from the standpoint of, hey, I want to make £1 million every year and make all kinds of money and travel the world and go to matches all the time. You probably got in because, hey, you stepped up to the game and said, hey, listen, now I need to know what I don't know to get myself better. So you probably thought like the rest of us, we got a team mom and found out where the cookie jar was, and the snacks, and then went from there. So what was your biggest transition, if you will? Because you said you went from youth with your son's team, and then you had a transition to women's, and then professional, and then to women's professional. What do you think the greatest transition was? Was it at the youth level? Or was it at the professional level? And I'll give you a two-part. Was it the transition on dealing with the players, number one, or was it a bigger transition in dealing with the parents?
I think at professional level, dealing with players is a breeze, right? So they
Mm.
get paid to play. Therefore, they have a brilliant attitude. They have a brilliant level of work ethic. They are really, really top class professionals and top class people as well. So there was no issues on the transition to that. The players made it very, very easy. I think the biggest transition for me was moving from someone who coached the grassroots team on a volunteer basis to starting my own business. And I started off with, I think it was 10 kids, and it was easy then, but then it quickly grew. And I ended up with 300 kids attending twice a week. And, you've got to go and hire coaches, you've got to go manage people. And yes, 300 sets of parents wanting updates on how their child's progressing because they want to know if they're getting value for money. So the transition elements there were a hard lesson. I made a lot of mistakes along the way, Mark. My parent communication could have been better. The method of communication could have been better. But my focus was all about the players and what was happening on the pitch. I wasn't there to create a team. I was just there to help the players be better from a technical point of view. Some parents struggled with that, and they were asking why, we didn't do sort of team stuff, formation stuff, and things like that. So my lesson from that was to be a bit more with my information, because it takes 5 minutes to call the of what you're going to be doing today.
Yeah.
And I took that lesson from that. When I stepped back into football at the youth level, at a good level, I would often go over to parents at the start of a match and just explain what was going on. So just to give you a flavour of what that meant, we had a game when I was coaching seven-a-side football, and I said to the parents, our defenders are not getting many touches of the ball because we're a good team. So I'm going to expose our defenders 1v1. I'm going to play a 1-4-1 formation today against the best team in the league. And our centre back, who will rotate throughout the game, will get exposure 1v1 against their striker. And I said, I need you to be overwhelmingly positive today because the kids are going to struggle. They're going to have a bad game because they're not used to this. We got beat 4-2, I think it was, Mark, but we got through the game intact because the parents were overwhelmingly positive from the sideline. So the lesson from when I ran my business was involve the parents more, which I then took into the team. And the team was then better as a result. It was more enjoyable for everyone, parents and players.
Yeah, and you raise an awesome point. It's all about setting expectations. I think from, the parent side, they bring their own expectations every match. They stop by the Starbucks and get their 6 pump venti milk stove, goat's milk, latte, right? You
Don't
know,
get me one.
Yeah, and a couple of dads will have a couple of pints, out in the parking lot before getting in there just to get warmed up. But I've always believed like you that I think once you set clear goals and set clear expectations, you don't get that level of frustration from the parents because now they're buying in to what you're doing to help the club become better and to help the entire team become better. And you know what? You're probably not going to appease 100% of them, but my rule has always been 90%. If I can get 90% of the players and 90% of the teams and 90% of the parents on my side, I've won the day. But it does take a while, to get that level of comfort, even to walk over to the sidelines and talk to the parents about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of coaches go wrong when they just sort of do things in isolation. So I always thought it was about the players. So it wasn't my team. I was just looking after it. It was all
Mm,
about the players and what they needed essentially to get through the next year of their football lives. Because if I couldn't give them that, there was a chance that they would walk away from the game. And we all know the statistics worldwide about player drop off.
yeah,
Hardly any players make it into their late teens. Hardly any players make it to their teens.
yeah,
So there's a real problem here. So I always took the road of development, yes, but involving the players. So we'd have a pre-season meeting, even at 10, 11 years old. Right, what is fun for you? What is football for you? And they would tell me, and I would weigh that up against their development needs. And we come together to create a plan for the season, players and myself and the other coaching staff, which then we would send to the parents. So if the parents came back and said, we don't agree with this, well, it was your children that came up with it. So you're essentially arguing with your children now. So there was never a problem on that front. Never, ever, ever. They bought into the fact that we were developing the players in line with what would make them happy. So there was a nice balance there. So as a coach, you have to be smart about it, Mark.
yeah.
It's not a dictatorship. It's not the coach's way or no way. It's all about the players. Sell that to the parents, get everything in writing, and then go with the plan for the season. And I think your season will go smoothly.
Yeah, amen to that. I mean, now in your seasons, do you do a lot of travel ball over there? Or are you pretty much club specific where you're playing inside a really good small geographic area?
It's geographic area from the league setup point of view. So you can, and we did travel. We traveled to England. We played in England a couple of times. A few teams travel to Spain. They go to Barcelona, Gothenburg in Sweden. So you can travel, but there's obviously an expense with
Mm,
that. And where UK soccer and US soccer is vastly different, is we would charge the kids, the equivalent of $10 a month just to cover paying a referee. We had our own pitches. We raised sponsor money for our kit. So it wasn't strictly pay to play. It was a very minimum amount just to take part. And if there was any kid who couldn't pay that, we just told them to forget it because it was so little anyway.
Yeah.
So to travel, Mark, would require us to fundraise and get a sponsor and all those things that, we need to do to raise money. So where the States teams have an advantage at pay to play is they open up their borders and their doors to different clubs and different ways of working, and they get to see a lot, whereas we're sort of in a small geographical area and can only learn from the coaches and the teams around us.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for that. Now, do you have what's your highest level over where you are right now when you look at a club level standpoint? Do you have all the way up to U17, U18, or they pretty much go into to college at that time and start playing for university?
So where we are in Scotland, there's football at every level imaginable. Now I've coached everyone from 1 year old all the way through to 70 years old at walking football. So there's a level of football that suits your age and your stage of where you're at as a player. We're very fortunate in this country that we are football crazy and there is no financial barrier to participation. So I've worked at every single level of the game, Mark, and the highest level at youth level would be an academy system, which goes all the way up to, I think it's U18. They may have changed the rules.
Mm-hmm.
So the professional side of the game have come up with this agreement where professional clubs at the highest level, so Rangers, Celtic, your big clubs, they can have a cooperative agreement with any club underneath the highest level, and they can send unlimited youth players to that club in order for those youth players to get experience. So that's what happens at that level. We don't really have a college or university game here. Well, we do, but it's not a pathway to professional or even earning a living from football. It's mainly the youth academy system where that happens. So I don't know if that answers your question because it's a very convoluted setup here. It's not as convoluted as US soccer, but it's
Right.
your entry point is your entry point, and you can go from that entry point all the way to professional, or you can fall out of that side of the game but still play amateur football, which doesn't allow you to be paid, or what's called junior football, which does allow you to be paid. So there are different levels depending on where you're at as a player. But as I said, we're a football daft nation, football crazy nation. So wherever you're at, you can get a game for a club and you can participate no matter what your age is. It's a good thing.
And thank you. And it's funny because you mentioned that my wife and I spent on our 35th wedding anniversary, we spent 35 days in Europe 3 years ago. So we went we went to 8 different countries, and we saw the level of soccer over there, football over there. That is like, we have craziness over here in America. We have, and there's some places over there. But one thing I did notice over there, Kevin, and I learned this when I was at a hurling match in Ireland, which is an unbelievable sport. I think the only thing you can do, you really can't kill somebody, but if you do, you get like 2 years in prison. That's about it, right? But one of the things I learned there is that they really do have a lot of pride in the local town that you play in or you play for. That banner that you wear around you, where here in the States it's not really about the town. It's really about the club. So we have guest players come in all the time. So we have the clubs come in, and then maybe when the club is done, we have guest players that sneak in, and that ticks the parents off because now little Joey and Johnny and Janie, who are playing normally, right, they're being told, hey, well, it's too bad, we're going to bring some guest players in because we're playing out the Score at the Shore tournament or the Surf Cup or the Disney tournament, right? So you don't have to worry about that as much, do you, over in your neck of the woods?
No, and I had this conversation with someone the other day on Twitter. So Scotland is a nation of 5 million people, and we have a national association which governs the game. But we also have these community foundations which are attached to professional clubs. Now, they're charitable arms attached to professional clubs, and they are responsible for increasing participation in the local community. And all of those charitable arms are backed by the Scottish Football Association, who govern the game. So we're a nation of 5 million people. We have an association who run the game, but they have handed over power and responsibility to local communities.
Mm.
In the States, You don't have that. You have different organizations and different businesses who are competing, trying to run soccer for the benefit of making money, if I could dare say that,
Sure, sure.
instead of community participation and bringing people under one badge, be it on the professional side or the community side, and allowing people from those communities to wear that badge no matter what level they play at. So I mentioned this earlier on. We have different levels, but most communities have that professional badge. They'll just have something else written underneath it, which maybe is youths or amateur or walking football. So the professional club plays under a badge and everyone else plays under the same badge. And that is maybe the community thing that you're hinting at that's
Yeah,
missing,
yeah.
maybe elsewhere, maybe even in Europe as well, Mark. I'll be 100% honest. But we take pride in where we live.
Mhm.
We love where we live, and everybody. My local club plays in the second highest division in Scotland, and the amount of people who volunteer and go down to the stadium, give it a lick of paint, help cut the grass, etc., is it's unbelievable because this town only has 20,000 people, but the vast majority of people are invested in the football club and are invested in football. So it's a good thing for the football club that that's in place because they can get a help either financially or through resources when they need it. I'm not sure if that's in place where you are. I think it's maybe up to just the club to roll up their sleeves and get on with things. But here it is a real community effort around that football club and that badge.
Yeah, and thank you for that. So two questions around that. One, when you pick your national team, okay, for say for the World Cup or for the Olympics, how does that where does that start? Do they start, they have open tryouts, or is there a select committee that gets together and then there's a 2 day or a 3 day workout? How do you select your players for both the men's and the women's teams over there?
Again, it's different over here because it's survival of the fittest, right? So the best
Mm.
players will go and play for the national team, like it is anywhere.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be very difficult for someone who's not in the youth academy system. And again, just to repeat myself, youth academy system is attached to these professional clubs, and they have the best coaches training the best
Mhm.
talent in order to bring them through into their first team and maybe sell them for profit. So we've had several instances where people have come through these academies and they've played for teams in Scotland and they've moved elsewhere. We've got a lot of players now playing in Italy, loads playing in England. So they're playing in the top leagues in the world. So Scotland has got better as a national team as a result. And Scotland's going to the World Cup. I'm not sure where you're based, Mark, but if there's a load of Scottish fans coming to your town, maybe just those.
Atlanta. No,
Yeah,
we live in Atlanta. Well, we're going to be here for the final. So, hey,
yeah.
we don't have a B and B at our lake house, but if anybody needs a couple of the beds to lay down on, we'll hook them up. How's that?
Going to be Scotland against the United States in the final then.
Yeah, that'd
But
be awesome. That would be
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. So for a nation of 5 million people, there are several nations like us who punch above their weight in terms of talent. But
Mm.
Scotland, in the last 5 to 10 years, has put in place a program, a development program aimed at the best of the best to make them even better so it can contribute to our national team. Because you'll see yourself, Mark, when the Scottish fans come to the States, you'll see how passionate they are about their country and also about football. As I said earlier on, it's hard for me to describe, but you will see it. We are the most passionate fans in the world, and we all rally around that Scotland badge when it's the national team time. So to answer your question, it is the best of the best that play for the national team, but they have to come through that professional setup in order to be the best of the best.
And thank you. So do you have like a feed? So is it a true feeder program that we have in like in the States? We have a lot of feeder programs in all sports. So not just football, soccer, basketball, but a feeder program, let's say in high school would be, hey, if you're a middle school kid, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade before you get to be a high school player, you play for that high school, middle school feeder program. So by the time you're a freshman in the high school level, you pretty much know the coach, you pretty much know the style of play and all those kind of things. So is that similar to what you guys do over there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was just at Leicester City's youth academy a couple of weeks back. So Leicester got relegated from the English Premier League, I think it was last season, and their youth academy is it's unbelievable, unbelievable. The facilities they have are out of this world. You wouldn't believe it until you see it. But what they have is they have their professional academy. So I think they'll start pulling kids in at maybe 8, 9 years old, maybe even younger.
Mm-hmm.
But they also have another level underneath that, which is kids that are maybe too good for the grassroots game, but not quite at the level of the youth academy. So they'll play for their grassroots team and they'll come in to train with Leicester, however many times a week it is. And out of that pool, they might move kids up or they might move them back down, might bring other kids in, but there's a real funnel there. So you cannot just go from playing on a Sunday with your local grassroots team all the way to a professional academy. You need to make the step through into their pre-academy program and then to their academy. So they have, describe it as a funnel, but it is a process that you have to go through to be identified by scouts and then pulled into the system and then pulled into the system properly. And they were saying last week at Leicester that they had kids, join it. I think it was maybe 7 or 8 years old, have gone on to play for the first team and have then transferred for millions and millions of pounds, which is the key difference to the States, because you can get traded, you can get released.
Mm-hmm.
Here, you can then get pulled into a transfer situation where you can move for millions and millions of pounds and your life can change overnight.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's in England, Mark. Leicester's in England.
Mm.
It's much the same in Scotland, but Scotland. So the UK left Europe.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
So before, the English academies could go to anywhere in Europe and pull kids out of any country and put them in their youth academy, so they could get the best of the best in Europe. English academies cannot do that anymore because of work permit issues, because we left the EU. So they're now coming to Scotland and taking the best talent from Scotland and moving them down to their academies in England. So in Scotland, we are very good at getting them into the academy, but then we are losing them, the best of the best, to the English academies at the moment. So football's ever changing because of that transfer system. What you're describing is someone maybe plays in high school and then college, they get identified, but they still need to go to a draft. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
There's no way for them to get to that level unless they are drafted. It's a little bit different in the UK and in Scotland.
Okay, and thank you for that answer. It helps me out, and for the parents that are listening as well, and some of the coaches. Here's a question for you that I know I ask every coach, and they all have a pretty much the same answer. Do you believe that it's the talent that takes the kids to the next level, or do you believe that it's really the training that takes them to the next level? Because some coaches will be like, well, if the kid's not going to train with me, and I don't mean me personally as a coach, but overall, some kids are just natural athletics. Their athleticism just comes out right away. But at some point in time that goes away when other kids surpass them. So what is your level of like athleticism to training do you think helps the kids get to the next level?
For me, I'll probably contradict myself through this answer, Mark, so apologies. For me, coaches are overrated, right?
Mm.
Having worked with thousands of football players at every level of the game, there's a lot of talent around. When I worked in the professional game, the manager used to say a phrase that stuck with me. He said, the football graveyard is full of talented players who wouldn't work hard. And that's true. Mm-hmm. So talent will only get you part of the way. You have to have a work ethic that allows you to then progress beyond the ceiling that you'll eventually hit with your talent. But that comes from the person. So no matter how much I coach the talented athlete, if inside they did not have that work ethic and that drive to go to the next level, they're never going to go there, ever, no matter what I do. So from that respect, coaching is overrated. And I have coached some really, really, really talented players who could do ridiculous things with the football. But here, something is not quite clicking. They don't have the heart for it. So they don't make it beyond that level that they're at. On the youth side, I have seen some really, really talented players who can do things with a ball that's magical, but they're not quite at that level where they are good enough to go to maybe England or anything like that, to the big, big teams. But they have a work ethic and a drive, which will probably get them to a very good level. And when they get to that level, it's up to them how they then progress. If they keep going the way they're going and keep compounding that effort, they will eventually reach a very, very good level. I know a couple of players that I would not be surprised if they played for Scotland. That's just because of what they have inside and up here, not necessarily their talent. So I said I was going to contradict myself. So hopefully I'm pretty clear so far. But I do think the role of coaches is overrated. I do think you've got to have a lot of luck as a football player, especially in the UK. I'm not sure what it's like in the States, because there are so many talented players that you just need someone to take a chance on you or believe in you or to spot something in you as a player that another coach hasn't. But also you have to keep yourself physically in top shape, especially these days. The game is so quick. The whole thing can change in seconds. And if you cannot do your 30-meter sprints, if you cannot jump higher than a defender to get to the ball before he can, you're not going to get anywhere in football. So it's a real mix of everything, Mark. I don't think there's no secret sauce, right?
Sure,
To make a
sure.
football player. If there was, we would all be
Oh
very
yeah.
rich because we'd all have that label of player developer or elite player developer, but no one can claim that because it's so variable. And hopefully I've not dodged the answer there, Mark, and hopefully I've not contradicted myself too
No,
much,
you're
but that's
good.
what I believe.
No,
Yeah.
you're good. The level of, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about coaching being overrated is sometimes like, in the States, as you know, we have our licenses. I was successful to go up to my B license and then get my KMVB license. And that was the hardest, believe it or not, the KMVB license was the hardest license I got. Because it not just taught me the things I didn't know, but from a being on the pitch for 4 days at my age at that time, I was 42, right? And I'm 71 now. But being on the pitch at 42 for 4 days with a bunch of guys who are, young DOCs in their mid 30s, like, what am I getting myself into here, right? Um, and I don't know how it is over in there with licenses. But I've seen some great coaches that were rec style coaches. Okay, we used to call them recreational. So back to your point early on, when I was a coach, when I first started coaching, I started coaching baseball, believe it or not, back in the 70s, 75. I think I was the original Bad News Bears coach. I had this team that I had to take over for a summer when I was home from college at Notre Dame. And, the kids I had were just a mess, and the parents were crazy. They were in the stands and they were crazy, right? And I didn't have any difference. But we came up with, we're taking the pitcher's mounds out and we're raking the grounds and we're doing all the things we did, right? As young coaches. We'd have a great work. We'd work all weekend long, getting the fields prepared, the baseball fields prepared, right? And you don't have that nowadays. Now you have professional groundskeepers at the youth level. You've got $60 million stadiums here in the United States. One's called Buford High School, and not too far from my house, that has a $60 million stadium. They have 8 soccer fields. 8. Okay, it's a high school, not a professional club, right? So, but the parents buy into that. Now you'll see the parents, they'll take away. I would rather have a parent help me out on shagging footballs for me when I'm doing my training lessons and those kind of things. But you know what they do? Because the booster clubs are so big here. The youth booster clubs, they're really like the collectives that you see right now in college sports in America. I call it the mafia. But they don't do the same things anymore. A parent would rather say, "Hey, look, let me give you $100," and like, no, I would just like to have you come out here for 2 hours and help me, cut the grass. They don't want to do that anymore. And it seems like over in your neck of the woods, that's a different philosophy. Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, you're right. I think that everyone gets invested in it on different levels. It's not treated as sort of a babysitting club where you drop your kid off, you leave and come back in 90 minutes and then pick the kid up again. So there's that side of things. But you know what? I think the problem these days, Mark, is that with the rise of available information on the internet, a lot of people are consuming the wrong information or they're consuming lots of different information at the same time. And there's not really anything wrong with the information itself, but it's impossible to consume it all at the same time, right? So if I'm a parent these days, I can watch football on the TV and I hear all these analysts talking about the professional game and dissecting it. And I think I'm a knowledgeable coach. If I don't do it in that medium, I then go online and I see all this stuff and I think I'm a knowledgeable coach. I'm not, I'm a parent. Okay. So I should just act as a parent. But I think that maybe the effect of that doubles when you're actually paying for a service, right? So you'll have your opinion and you will be more of a consumer or a customer rather than an invested stakeholder in the club, in what the club are doing, in your child and other children who are playing. So I think that we as people just need to be careful about how we're consuming information and how we're treating that kind of service, because football is not just football. It teaches kids and young people valuable, valuable life lessons from a teamwork ethical point of view and from a communication point of view, from all these things that we all know about. So if a parent gets invested in it and invests in learning about what the child is doing, the child then sees that and then wants to do what's best for the parent, because the parent's taking an interest in it, and the parent is the child's greatest role model.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as we move away from maybe more of a community focused approach to football to more of a commercial focus, I think we'll lose a lot. And I don't know if you agree, because you're closer to it than I am, but I'm very fortunate that I interact with thousands of coaches on a weekly basis, on a daily basis. And United States coaches all tell me similar things, that pay to play is necessary because of the cost of fields and facilities and everything else, but it is a necessary evil, and it's not necessarily the best thing for the game. So I don't know, I'm going off on tangents and segues here, Mark, but that's my thoughts on the whole situation from afar. I don't know if you agree or disagree.
Well, you've got, like you said, you talk to thousands of coaches, so you have data, right, that supports not your tangent, but your data says, hey, I've talked to hundreds or thousands of coaches, and if 90% of them are telling me this, I'm going to go to 90% that I interact with, because that data now is important. It's important to me as a coach. It's important to me as a parent or a consumer, and it's important to me as a player. And, one of the things that we do over here in the pay to play is, it starts out too early to me. I mean, I think probably some of the worst words that we can use are the words like, elite and premier and, Olympic development, the ODP. I was involved in ODP 100 years ago, right? And every kid now thinks when they get to they get to ODP, next thing you know, they're going to get signed by some team when they're 11 years old. And I don't think they understand that process. Those words mean something. And you know what, Kevin, back in the day, we didn't have those words when I grew up. We had recreational, right? And we might have had an all-star team, all-star baseball team, all-star football team, all-star basketball team, all-star soccer team, and then it elevated up. Now you got U6 kids that are traveling from Atlanta to California to play on the U6 Donkey Bowl pickleball championship. It's crazy, right? Thousands of dollars. Coaches are getting into it. Kids wearing, $400 pair of glasses. They don't even wear the glasses. They put them on top of their head as baseball players, right? Crazy. So that's my tangent, is like when you're dealing with all those things, the kid that wears I used to tell kids, and when we were in soccer, I was like, dude, if you're coming out here and wearing those bright yellow soccer cleats at $450 and you're 6 years old, you better be a player, because if not, that green collar isn't going to help you out. It's crazy.
Mark, I often rant about this on social media. I'm becoming a bit disillusioned with coaching now. The amount of people that are saying, oh, if you sign up to my service or you come to my training and I'll make you an elite player, is getting out of hand. And not only that, we are now using elite examples as to why we should train other non-elite players in a way that suits a narrative. It's dangerous, it's disingenuous, and it's very, very dangerous in my opinion.
It is.
So each player is at a different stage of their development, and you have to meet the player where they're at, not where you think they should be at or where you're promising to get them. But as coaches, we're also at different stages of our development, and we are our own worst enemy. We'll go and seek out the pro licensed coach or the someone who's played and coached at a certain level to learn from them when we're operating at a different level. And that coach who we're learning from or who we're consuming information from has never worked at our level. Therefore, we are just compounding our mistakes, because we're going onto a training pitch with players that suit our level and trying to teach them stuff that the elite players are doing. It's never going to work. And I think that's why youth football, especially youth soccer, is experiencing this high drop-off, because we're not meeting players where they're at. We're meeting them where we think they should be at and where we want to take them. And I think that when you're advertising a service and you're charging a lot of money for that service, you need to start sounding clever, and you need to start using fancy football words, and you need to start teaching the players these fancy concepts that they cannot comprehend or understand just so you look like you can justify your fee rather than taking those players through a development cycle. And I wrote about this in my book, Mark. There's four kinds of coaches that are, I think, not destroying youth soccer, but they're not helping it. And these coaches I see every single day online, and they are not helping the situation by A, not realizing what they're doing, and B, being disingenuous and dangerous with their advice, in my opinion. I'm not saying anything in here that I've not said online. We have to strip things back to a level where new coaches especially can comprehend and understand the advice that we're giving, and they don't think they need to sound like this elite analyst on the TV, or they don't need to sound like they're this elite coach who is delivering sessions for 10-year-olds. We just need to, I think, as a coaching cohort, watch how we're talking, watch the information that we're giving, and help new coaches along the process that we had to go through. You've been doing this a lot longer than me, Mark. You know what the process is.
Yeah.
I know what the process is. We cannot shortcut our development as coaches, nor can we shortcut the development of players, in my opinion.
No, amen. And to that question, I think I mentioned to you in one of our school rants back and forth where we've had, when I went and got my KNVB license, the guy that ran the class for us that came over, awesome guy. Okay. Just a fit guy, just a really cool guy. And he said to me, he says, "Hey, Mark, would you mind doing me a favor? Can I come to your club?" And we had, when I was a DOC there, we had about 2,200 people, 2,200 kids in the club, big club. Okay. And he said to me, "Can I come with you and watch a couple of matches?" I said, "Sure." So we had got done a Friday night game, Friday night practice during our session, and Saturday mornings we were going to be off until 11. I said, "Come on over, watch a couple of young matches," and we went around to about 7 different matches. And within an hour, he walked to me and goes, "Okay, hey, pretty good. I'm glad I can see what I can see." He goes, "You know what the problem with you Americans is?" I'm like, "Well, that's a loaded question. There's a lot of problems." "What's the problem?" He goes, "You have the wrong coaches at the youth level." And I said to him, "What do you mean by that?" And I thought it was a pretty astute young guy, right? I said, what do you mean by that?" He goes, "You've got, the guy with the big word coach on the back of his jersey, probably never played the game, right? His wife's shoveling 4 dozen donuts into the kids' mouths when they're 7 years old, right? And their sugar's going right to the bodies. And by the second half, they're completely worn out." He didn't say that, but I knew that before, right? So I said, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "You just have the wrong coaches." Where we are over in, when we're trained, we have our best coaches at the youth level because that's where the development has to be. You having coaches that don't have any idea about the game, don't have a background in the game, never played the game, don't have a license there, they can't appreciate what they have to do. He said, "Now, if you took that same dad with the coach on the back and put him on a U17 team, just sit him in a chair and say, 'Dude, these guys are going to play the game by themselves. You might have to make 3 or 4 adjustments and maybe at halftime, right? But not here because they're always constantly hollering,' right?" I was like, man, that is such an awesome, and that really did flip my decision, not just in soccer, Kevin, but, I train NFL kickers and punters, right? And I said, okay, great. I end up stopping training kickers and punters. I have 2 guys that play in 4 guys right now I train that still play in the NFL. So 4 guys out of 32 teams, not bad for some old fart like me. But the thing was that got me was I don't need to train those guys any longer. They're in the NFL. If they need training from me, we got bigger problems, right? So I said I completely flipped myself around because it wasn't about my ego. It wasn't about, hey, look who I'm training. Hey, look at this, look at this. It was like, I need to help these young kids out. I need to help the 10, 12, 14, 15-year-old kid out there whose mom or dad might go on YouTube all of a sudden and think they're going to look at a YouTube video for some knucklehead guy out there teach them how to kick and punt. I'm like, oh my gosh, right? So probably like you're right. We have to be careful, right, as what we do as coaches. And I'm a very strong believer you have to have a non-dictatorial point of view as a soccer coach. And the only time I became a dictator was when I was a referee. I would tell the parents that on the sidelines. I said, look, as soon as I blow this whistle, I'm a dictator. You're hollering at me, shouting he's offsides and all this kind of things. Not gonna do you any good. So, from my standpoint, do you agree or disagree with some of those things about just from when you talk to young coaches nowadays? What advice do you give them?
So just I get sent a lot of video from coaches from around the world. So nearly every single video I get sent from a coach in the United States, the coach is talking and shouting the whole game. Not shouting at his players, he's trying to help his players.
Hmm.
But it happens in other parts of the world as well. So my first advice would be just you've done your work on the training ground. A game is for you to detach emotionally and observe. So Robbie Nielsen was a coach at Hearts, and he told me once, you got to be fire in your belly, but ice in your head. You got to be calm, right? You got to be just calm and logical, and you got to observe. So that's the first piece of advice, because you cannot possibly observe and take in all the information that's happening in a match if you're constantly trying to joystick coach and talk.
Hmm.
So, and if you just stop and watch, you'll see a lot. You'll see a lot. You'll see what's worked from training, and you'll see what you need to maybe build on, and you'll see what has worked, what hasn't worked rather in training. So that's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is don't try and jump from being a new coach to someone who does systematic development and can make tactical in-game adjustments in the space of a few weeks. So when lockdown happened here, when COVID hit here, the Scottish FA moved all their courses online. And we saw a lot of coaches accelerating from their level one to their level two to the UEFA C license, B license, then A license. They just totally shortcut the whole experience of
Yep.
solidifying their knowledge from each course.
Hmm.
So that's become a real problem. People just want to get to the end as quickly as they can. It's like a race to them, whereas they should just relax, apply the knowledge learned, and then go to the next stage when they're ready, not necessarily because they feel peer pressure to do so. And there's reasons behind that, Mark. To get a job in a professional environment, you need to have an A license these days, I think
Oh,
minimum.
yeah. Yeah,
So
sure.
if you want to earn money from the game, you have to get that A license as quickly as possible. So it's not all on the coach. But I think it's important from an experience point of view that they do that. The third piece of advice is just be a good person. I'm not the best coach in the world. I've never ever claimed to be the best coach in the world, but I genuinely care about people and take a vested interest in them. Kids come to training and practice. I'll ask how their day was, how school was, how their sister was, how their mum and dad are. I'll take an interest in them, not because it's something I feel like I need to do, but I actually do care. I
Yeah.
actually care, and they'll ask me, and it's a two-way thing. In the professional environment, sometimes players will need a little cuddle, and sometimes they need to kick up the backside. And it's
Hmm.
knowing when to do that. And you cannot know when to do that unless you're a good person. So yeah, so it's three things here, but mainly just be a good person. You don't need to be this harsh critic to all your players. You don't need to judge players based on their parents' behaviors. You've invested in the kid or the player. You've not invested in the parents, so you can just maybe put up with some parent behavior if the kid is progressing and is a good kid and is not disruptive to your environment. So there's the whole human element there, Mark, that I think is really, really important, that you don't learn on coaching courses, and you do not learn unless you get the experience that I talked about with the previous 2 points. So that would be my advice. It's a bit woolly, and it's probably not the advice that people want to hear, but that's my experience, and that's what's worked for me over the past 16 years.
Yeah, and we have a couple of questions left. I know you're busy, and you know what? One of the things I had to deal with when the parents would say to me, like, I said, I don't mind you encouraging the boys and the girls, but and one lady was like, well, I'm always shouting at him. Like, see, that's the problem. I have to overcoach you because he hears your voice 22 of the 24 hours a day. I only get him for 90 minutes 3 times a week. So all he hears is blah, 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 blah. When the game comes down, who do you think he's going to listen to? Me, the coach, who's trying to overholler from 22 or 25 of you on the sidelines, right? Or me. And I said, so, and she was like, wow, I never really thought of it that way. Well, that didn't change her mind. She still did what she wanted to do because inherently parents are the customers, right? They're going to say they're the customers. So my only question I have for you before we wrap up, two questions. One is, um, have you ever fired, have you ever fired a player?
I have fired a player. No, I've banned a player from matches and training
Hmm.
for misbehaving.
Yeah.
So there's a whole debate online about this nearly every few weeks. You know, what do you do with the talented kid who's very disruptive? Well, for me, you have to understand the kid's background. You have to understand maybe what he's going through.
Yes. Yes.
But also, Mark, you also have to have team rules. Okay, so you have to have consequences for breaking those team rules. And I've had kids where they have had problems at home and they're having problems at school, and they think they can come to practice and act like they do at home or at school, and it's just not happening with me. So I'm not one that just criticizes without giving the tools to be better. So this one kid, I said to him, he would get really angry. He had anger issues. He would go onto the pitch and he would start fights with his teammates, with opposition. So I says, when you feel like you're getting angry, just touch the badge and just remember that if you do blow up and you do start a fight, you'll be coming off the pitch. You won't be having fun playing football, and you'll let your teammates down, and also your parents will be disappointed in you, and I'll be disappointed in you. So that worked. You know, so he would touch the badge and it would calm him down. I could see him doing it during games when he started to get angry. So again, it's all very well pointing out people's flaws and problems, but you have to help them and give them the tools to solve those problems. So that was a successful one. But there was a kid who nothing we did worked. So he would, lash out on the field. I'd bring him off straight away. He'd sit with me at the sidelines and I would say, "Is this fun?" And he would say, "No." And I would try and explain to him, "Well, this is a consequence of your action because you're breaking team rules. We don't raise our hands and we don't say a cross word to each other or even the opposition." So when these things happen and it's repeat behavior, the rest of the kids on the team, they think they can start doing it. So
Sure.
it's really important that you reinforce your own rules.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's just words. So I've had to say to parents that, kids are not allowed to play at the weekend. And the other parents are saying, "Well, it's a big game. We lose this kid, we might lose." I'm just like, I don't care. I really don't care, because this environment is a good environment for 90% of the time. And when it gets disrupted and we let players get away with that, then that 90% drops to 80, then 70, then 60, then 50, and then we've got real problems.
Mm.
So yeah, I would say that there's an understanding level. There's rules put in place with that understanding level in mind. There's also solutions and tools given to players to combat them and any issues they have rather. But when a line is crossed, then I have to send them home. But again, this is all youth players. On the adult side of things, I've fallen out with players on the pitch many, many times, many times in training. Oh my goodness, I've said some stupid things. They've said some stupid things to me, Mark, but I've never fired anyone or sent anyone home or transfer listed anyone. Have we had conversations as a coaching staff about problem players? Yes. Have we got rid of problem players? Yes. I'll give you an example. I was coaching an adult game, and one of the players was on the other side of the pitch, bad mouthing me to the fans, apparently. And someone I know heard it. They told me, and that was the last time she ever played for me. She was out the door within 2 weeks because I'm not putting up with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a line that was crossed. But I don't think that counts as firing. That just maybe is
Yeah.
a transition of player out the door. But yeah, I think that, again, you be a good person, but if people start to take advantage of you, or if you start to notice that the environment is being disrupted because of one or two people, then you have to take action as a coach. Otherwise, it gets much, much worse. And then eventually you get fired.
Yeah.
And that's what happens.
Yeah. And you raised a good point. I mean, you said it earlier, because I'm a very, very strong believer in this. I get into the kids a lot more. I know a lot more about the kids sometimes than I want to know, but I do. I get it. I have a very good. I try to have a personal relationship with them. Not so much with the parents. If I can with the parents, that's awesome. I love to hang out with those guys if I can, right? I go to the games and everything else with them. But there are kids that get bullied. There are kids that get bullied, and I think the bullying comes on social media. I call it social madness. So the kid comes back from a game, he misses a shot, or he misses a field goal, or he misses a kick, right? And then he comes home, and then he goes upstairs in his bedroom or downstairs in the basement, wherever he is, and then he just gets it perpetrated by having others. You really sucked. You didn't do that great of a job, blah, blah. So you have to take a personal relationship, I think, in with those kids, because they do come from issues. I came from a divorced family, 7 kids, but I didn't know any difference. We just had to keep on getting on. We had to get on. My parents didn't care. about my feelings. They're like, dude, if you just gotta go out and play. And I think that's the most important word is play
The
because these
difference
turn into
today,
work.
Mark, is sorry. The difference today is when we were younger, it was maybe during school hours the bullying took place.
Yeah.
But you're right. These days, there's no barrier to it with technology and whatnot.
24/7.
You don't know what goes on away from training, and you don't know what goes on away from the field. So you have to have a degree of empathy as a coach these days, and a
Hmm.
high degree of empathy at that. So I fully, fully agree with you. Sorry, I cut you off there, Mark. I thought I was in the.
No, no, that's okay. And that's what I'm saying to the coaches. The what I get a lot from the coaches, probably a higher degree of 90 some percent, is that they are very invested. They don't get invested, they get invested with the kids themselves, even after the match is over, or after practice is over, or after a game is over. Like we have this thing called National Signing Day. So I went to 6 National Signing Days last week. Kids who got scholarships for college. Right? I went to their personal thing, hung out with their parents, got pictures taken, all that kind of stuff. But what I hear from all the coaches across the board is that when they have that personal relationship with those kids know that whatever they tell their coach, it's not going to get back to their parent. Or they'll be upfront and saying, "Hey, you know what? These are my issues I'm facing right now." And I think that is the true mark of a real coach when a player can walk up to you and go, "Hey, look, you know what, coach? I'm gonna let you know. I had a tough, my girlfriend just broke up with me. We've been dating together for 6 months, blah, blah, blah. And we'll talk through it. But inevitably, I'll say to him, okay, that's a little small adversity. And that's my last question to you is how strongly do you look at adversity when a young man or woman comes from one area and they have some adversity in their life? A knee injury, a shoulder injury, those kind of issues. What do you look for in those kind of players that have that adversity in them that they've overcome as players?
Yeah, it's a good question. Again, I've been very fortunate to work with many, many different players down the years, all different levels. And I managed to make friends with a lot of the adult players that I've coached. I still keep in touch with guys after they even leave the club that I worked at. And I think that when I ran the community foundation in my local area, there were 700 people that came twice a week, and then a population of 20,000. That's quite impressive to
Hmm.
get 700 people playing football twice a week.
Hmm.
But they came from all different backgrounds. And you know what? I heard some heartbreaking stories, Mark. Really heartbreaking stories that I obviously cannot share here. But especially kids, people go through really, really tough times away from football. And it's their social circumstances or something happened in their family, or people have had to move from one area of Europe to Scotland to get away from someone who would do them harm. I have heard it all. In terms of adversity and how it can fuel you, well, first of all, football is a safe space for a lot of people. The last thing you want to do is make it an unsafe space in any way. You don't want to break trust. You want to gain trust. And I always say to players that you can make mistakes on the football field. I'm not going to criticize you for trying something and it not coming off, because I know if you keep trying, eventually you will get it. So if you want to free players from the fear of making mistakes, don't shout at them after they make a mistake. Don't get on their back. Don't compound that adversity they might be experiencing elsewhere, be it bullying, be it anything else that we've talked about so far. So you have to build a level of trust with players, no matter what level they work at. And that's just on the community side. At the professional side, I've had players come to me and confide in me about personal circumstances, and I've tried to help them as best I could, because it's hard for a professional player who has to move from London all the way up to the north of Scotland. They don't have a family unit around them. They don't have anyone around them to help them take care of their problems. So if they trust you enough to confide in you, then you cannot break that trust, especially if they say not to. So I've had adversity from players at different levels. One thing that really sticks out, there's a guy who played for Queen's Park Rangers, who are in the second highest division in England, obviously a big, massive club. He broke his back while he was there, and he signed for the club I was at after he broke his back, and he rehabbed and he recovered. He managed maybe 15 games, and he was really, really good in those 15 games. He had to stop training because his back flared up again, and eventually he had to stop playing because his back flared up again. This was a really talented kid, 6'5", really well built, physically able,
Wow.
but technically brilliant. Had to stop playing. how do you speak to a kid like that and keep him positive and tell him it's going to be okay? Because it's not going to be okay. Because football's been his life for
Mm,
since he was 6, 7 years old.
mm.
That's tough. But again, he found solace in writing. He found solace in doing other activities that were not football based. So it's turning his focus to maybe those kind of things instead of just purely football, because football doesn't define someone. No matter how many times you hear that everyone's all in about football and invested in football and it's their whole life, it doesn't define you. So I guess what I'm saying, Mark, is that no matter the adversity levels of the person you're speaking to, there's always something that you can turn them to give them a safe space, be it within football or within a bit of a player care element or turning their attention to other activities that they do. And it goes back to my comment earlier on about being a good person and taking an interest in people. Because unless you take an interest in them, you won't know what's going on in their life and other activities they might have, or how much football means to them, or what's happening at home, or even build the trust level to figure all that out and find all that out. So the human element, I have to repeat this many, many times over and over because it seems to be getting lost these days, but it is crucial and it's vitally important to being not just a good coach, but being a good person around your players and your roster, in my opinion.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, and especially today, I think the lessons that we learned as young kids ourselves, right? We can't really equate them. I can equate my father and mother getting divorced and an abusive father to kids, right? But I can't equate that to a kid who I literally trained, whose parents were crack cocaine addicts. Seriously, they had to take him away. Their parents were in jail, and now the kid just got a full scholarship, right? I mean, so I can talk about that, but I can't talk about what he went through, right? That adversity. But I did tell him, Kevin, you know what? You've got a story to tell. It may come out 20 years from now. It may come out 15 years from now, but that story that you went through, if that can impact some other player down the road or some other young kid that's going down the road, you're never going to know, but you got to tell that story. And I think some people are embarrassed about that because I was embarrassed many years that I was the only Irish Catholic kid in my whole block that parents got divorced. I was like, what the hell did I do wrong? Right? I'm just trying to be a kid. I can't control what my parents did. So with that, the last two questions I have for you is one, where can people find out where to get your book? That's the most important thing.
It's on Amazon. It's called The Rise of the Dogmatic Football Coach. And that's a provocative title. And I do think that football is turning into dogma these days in certain circles. You must train players with this methodology, or you must do this thing in training, or you must win every game at every level of football you play at, or etc. etc. So the book isn't a boring football textbook. It's an analogy. So I've taken a story of a restaurateur who starts a business and I've turned it into football themed. So it tells the story through the restaurant lens because I think that we've all read the book which says, don't coach this way or do coach
Right,
this way. And
right.
it's preachy. This isn't preachy. This is a story that you can invest in because I think that when someone shines a light on your coaching through an analogy, you might actually take to it as a lens instead of a criticism. And I think
Yeah.
that it's found an audience. There's a lot of people in the United States that have bought it, more in the United States than the rest of Europe.
That should tell
So
you something.
that's found an audience there. And again, I think that looking at things through a lens can lead to growth instead of just taking it personally as a criticism of your coaching or how you coach. And that's how it's been perceived. I'm really, really glad. So my book's on there. Mark, I've got so many things on the go that try and help coaches. I've got an online community of coaches. I've built apps that help coaches. I've got websites. I've got products. People can find me on X. That's probably my main platform. It's coach_Kevin_M. That's you'll find me on there. I get lots of DMs on there. I'm always happy to help coaches on there. But yeah, just be prepared for me to have a rant or two on X about the state of modern coaching.
No, no, but that's a healthy discussion because I think we have to have it. You know, we have to we listen, they're the discussions that we have to have. They're the hard conversations that I think don't exist a lot of times, but they have to. Because if we don't have these discussions, we're never really going to find out where we are in the player development and the parent development and then the coaching development. So hopefully if you come across if you come from Scotland over here to the US, if you find yourself coming and you're going to be in the Atlanta area, You're more than welcome to come join us. I'll put you up here at our house. You can hang out for a couple of days, have a couple of pints if you're a pint person. And it's been awesome listening to you. Do you have any one group of words that you live by or slogan that you live by that you can think about that's on your wall every day, or one thing you say before we leave that's important?
I don't have a slogan, Mark. I don't really believe in the marketing slogans and things like that. But I just think that as people, if we work hard at something we believe in, then we have the power to impact a lot of people. And hopefully I do that day to day. I get messages from coaches all the time saying, thank you, you've helped my coaching, or you've helped this problem I've had with a parent or a player. I'm always happy to give advice because I always remember the advice I got back when I started. And I wouldn't be here 15, 16 years later into coaching without that advice. So we should always pay it forward. But yeah, we have to work hard at our craft. Otherwise, we'll never ever stick at it, and we'll never ever get good at it, if I can allow myself to say I'm good at it. But yeah, that's what I believe in. It's not a slogan because it's about
It's
400 words instead of 3 words. But
it's good enough. And people can always find you on school as well, right? On the
yeah,
school
yeah,
community, correct? Right.
yeah,
That's another
yeah.
big thing for you, right? So I mean, for anybody who doesn't get on the school community, which is skool.com, you should, because it's an awesome. It really is just an. I think that's going to be the amazing platform next couple of years. That's going to help communities like Kevin and I are both in. That's how we found each other on the school community. So thanks, Kevin. Thanks very much for joining us today. It's been an awesome time. I'll go and get this thing downloaded, and then I'll send it over to you. And hope you have an awesome day.
Thank you, Mark. Nice to talk to you.
Thanks, Kevin. Have a great day. And
Thank you.
ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much for joining us. Until our next episode on Don't Kick Your Coverage, this is Coach Nolan and Coach Middleton signing off for today. Take care, everyone.